Seward.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. While sometimes I do agree with Senator Faulkner about procedure in this Senate, on this particular matter I don't, in terms of motions, but in particular this motion. This motion calls on the government to issue a moratorium on the return of any asylum seekers back to Iraq and offer reprieve to those detained in immigration detention on Manus Island, Nauru and Christmas Islands to allow them to apply for protection in Australia. Quite frankly, this is an urgent situation, and this is the type of situation I would expect these sorts of motions to apply to. This is urgent. Motions deal with this sort of urgency, and it is a blunt instrument because this is a very desperate, urgent situation where people are being moved back to a war zone. This is a war zone. Their lives are at risk. And as late as, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, less than 10 days ago, an Iraqi man was taken back to Iraq, to a war zone. This is urgent. And what we find this chamber saying is, actually, we don't want to talk about it. No approach was made to us to try and refer it to or try and amend this motion or to send it to a debate. It was just, no, we're not going to grant you formality for a situation that is desperate. The very sorts of situations that these motions should be able to deal with. Because what this chamber would prefer to do, apparently, is to send this off to a debate. Because when you send this block formality for here, it gets put on the end of the notice paper and it never comes back. That is not appropriate for a situation that is desperate. People are being sent back to a situation where they are highly likely to lose their lives. That's how Australia thinks it's appropriate to treat refugees, people that have fled terror, have fled persecution. And what is happening now in Iraq are those sorts of situations where there is terror, where there is persecution happening and where you are seeing armed conflict. That is not appropriate. I would have thought this was a fairly obvious motion to enable us to actually send a message to the government that we think a moratorium on sending refugees, remembering we're talking about refugees, people who have already fled for their lives. And we're saying don't send them back to that situation now. Globally, they are trying to deal with this issue. But one of the things that we can do is make sure that people that are already terrorised, that have already fled for their lives, have already fled this sort of conflict, that we don't send them back to a situation that everybody globally is saying is outrageous and is trying to rectify. It is not appropriate, we do not believe, that you say, no, we're not even going to think about it in this chamber. Let's put it off to a debate somewhere much further down the track. Or at least come to us and say, actually, can we amend this? No, there was nothing like that. I understand from Senator Hanson-Young that no approach was made about amending this, or in fact trying to work out a time to debate this issue. We in the Greens believe it is totally unacceptable to be forcing people back to Iraq, which is a war zone. We do not support that sort of approach by the government of this country in our name. And this motion calls on the government to issue a moratorium, to say basically it's not appropriate to send asylum seekers back to a war zone. We will never support asylum seekers being sent back to a war zone, not now and not in the future.